It was the coldest night of the year when a boy in torn clothes pushed open the door of a gas station. Snow clung to his hair. His lips were blue. On his back lay a wounded German shepherd, bleeding and limp. The cashier's eyes widened as the boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $10 bill, his last bit of money. "Please," he whispered. "I just need something to help him." The man behind the counter hesitated, not knowing that this small act of kindness would set off a chain of miracles. By morning, the boy who had nothing would become a hero the world would never forget. Stay till the end, because this story will leave you shocked. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The wind howled through the narrow alleys, carrying with it shards of snow that cut against the boy's face like tiny blades. His red jacket, once bright, was now faded and torn, offering little protection against the bitter cold. Each breath came out as a cloud of frost, trembling in the dim glow of the flickering streetlights. He was maybe 13, too young to be wandering alone in weather that could freeze a grown man solid. But he had nowhere else to go. His name was Ethan, though no one had called him that in months. The city had forgotten him, just another face lost to winter's cruelty. He shuffled along the empty street, clutching a crumpled dollar in his pocket, hoping to find something, anything to eat. His shoes were soaked through, every step a painful reminder of how long he'd been walking. Then he heard it, a faint sound, barely audible through the wind. A whimper. Ethan froze, his breath hitching. He turned toward a dark alley, eyes narrowing. There, half buried in snow beside an overturned trash can, lay a German shepherd. Its fur was matted with blood, one paw twisted at an odd angle. The dog's chest rose and fell weakly. Ethan hesitated. He could barely take care of himself, let alone an animal, but as he knelt closer, the dog opened its eyes, soft, pleading, full of pain yet trust. Something in that gaze broke through the numbness inside him. He whispered, "Hey, it's okay, boy. I got you." Without thinking twice, he shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around the shivering dog. The freezing air bit into his skin, but he didn't care. He lifted the dog onto his shoulders, staggering under the weight. "Hang in there," he murmured, his voice trembling. "You're not dying tonight." Snowflakes swirled around them as he stepped back onto the street. One boy, one wounded soul, walking together through the storm. Neither knew it yet, but this desperate act of kindness would change both their lives forever. Ethan's arms trembled beneath the weight of the German shepherd, but he refused to let go. The dog's blood soaked into his sleeve, warm against the icy air. Each step through the snow felt heavier than the last. The streets were nearly empty now, just the howl of the wind, the distant hum of traffic, and the soft, pained breaths of the animal resting across his shoulders. He glanced around desperately, searching for light, for warmth, for help. Every window he passed was dark, every door locked tight against the storm. He tried shouting once, "Help! Somebody, please!" but his voice vanished into the blizzard like it had never existed. The city didn't hear him. Maybe it never had. The dog whimpered, a weak sound that pierced deeper than hunger or cold ever could. Ethan looked down at the dog's eyes, half closed but still watching him, trusting him. That trust burned like fire in his chest. "You're not going to die on me," he whispered fiercely. "Not after I found you." When he finally spotted the glowing red light of a gas station sign flickering through the snow, his heart leapt. He stumbled toward it, nearly slipping, his breath ragged. The glass door swung open with a jingle, and warm air hit his face for the first time in days. Inside, bright lights and shelves full of food made him dizzy. The cashier froze when he saw them, a filthy boy with no coat, carrying a bleeding dog. The smell of snow and iron filled the air. Ethan lowered the dog gently onto the floor near the counter, his fingers numb. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $10 bill, the last of what little he had left. "Please," he said hoarsely, his lips trembling. "I just need something to help him. Please." The cashier looked from the boy's frostbitten hands to the dying animal at his feet, and in that fragile, silent moment, the world held its breath, because one man's choice would soon decide whether this night ended in tragedy or in hope. The warmth of the gas station was almost painful after the biting cold outside. Ethan's fingers stung as feeling slowly returned to them, his breath still shaky. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, reflecting off rows of bright snack packages and soda cans that looked like treasures from another world. For a moment he just stood there, half frozen, half terrified, while the bleeding dog lay whimpering at his feet. The cashier, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a name tag that read Ray, stared in disbelief. "Kid, what happened?" he asked, voice rough. Ethan swallowed hard. "He's hurt bad. I just need something to stop the bleeding. Bandages, maybe? Or medicine?" He unfolded the crumpled $10 bill with trembling hands, holding it out like it was a lifeline. Ray glanced at the bill, then at the dog, its side rising and falling unevenly, the snow melting off its fur into small puddles on the tile floor. "You can't bring that thing in here," Ray said quietly, but there was hesitation in his tone. Ethan's voice cracked. "Please, sir. I'll clean up, I promise. I just can't let him die." The few customers in the store had gone silent, watching the scene unfold. A woman near the coffee machine whispered, "Poor kid." Another man shook his head and muttered something about rules. Ethan didn't care. He knelt beside the dog, pressing his jacket against the wound to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me, buddy," he whispered. "You're gonna make it." Ray felt a pang deep in his chest. He'd seen plenty of desperate people come through his shift, but something about this boy was different. There was no anger, no demand, just a quiet, unshakable determination. He looked again at the trembling hand holding that last $10 bill, and something inside him broke. "Wait here," Ray muttered, turning toward the back room. He came back moments later with a small first aid kit and a half-empty bottle of water. "Take it," he said, sliding them across the counter. Ethan blinked, confused. "But what about the money?" Ray shook his head. "Keep it, kid. Looks like you already gave enough." For the first time that night, Ethan's eyes filled, not from cold, but from gratitude. In that tiny gas station, surrounded by shelves and strangers, hope had quietly found its way back into his frozen heart. Ray leaned against the counter, watching as Ethan carefully unwrapped the bandages with trembling fingers. The boy's hands were raw and red, cracked from cold, but his movements were gentle, almost practiced. The German shepherd whimpered softly, eyes fluttering as Ethan whispered, "It's okay, Shadow. I've got you." He'd given the dog that name just moments ago, Shadow, because that's what the animal had become, the only thing still following him through the darkness. Ray's chest tightened. He knew the rules. No animals inside, no charity handouts, but something about this moment felt too human to ignore. He remembered his own son around the same age before the accident that had taken him years ago. The boy's face, Ethan's desperation, it all collided in his mind like a ghost refusing to fade. He stepped out from behind the counter, crouching beside them. "You did good, kid," he murmured. "You wrapped that wound just right." Ethan looked up, startled. "You're not mad?" Ray gave a small, weary smile. "If caring about someone makes me mad, then maybe I need to be." He slipped a hand into his pocket and pulled out a few protein bars, sliding them toward Ethan. "Eat, both of you." The boy hesitated, then tore one open and held half to Shadow's muzzle. The dog sniffed weakly before licking it once, and for the first time, Ethan let out a shaky laugh. Ray turned toward the door, snow swirling outside under the streetlight. "You got anywhere to go?" he asked quietly. Ethan shook his head. "Just wherever he can rest," Ray nodded slowly. He couldn't take them home, not yet, but he could at least give them one thing. Time. "You stay in the storage room tonight," he said finally. "It's warm. No one will bother you." Ethan's eyes widened. "You mean it?" Ray smiled softly, voice low. "Yeah, kid. Sometimes rules are worth breaking." As the boy carried Shadow into the back room, Ray watched them disappear into the dim light, two broken souls finding warmth in a world that had long gone cold. The storage room was dimly lit, its walls lined with boxes of old supplies and dusty bottles. The hum of the heater was the only sound breaking the silence. Ethan laid Shadow gently on a folded blanket that Ray had found in the back, then sank to the floor beside him. His fingers still ached from the cold, but his heart felt a flicker of warmth for the first time in weeks. He cleaned Shadow's wound with trembling hands, wincing each time the dog whimpered. "I know, buddy," he whispered softly. "It hurts, but it's going to be okay." The dog's eyes fluttered open. weak but still filled with trust. That look alone gave Ethan the strength to keep going. He wrapped the bandage tightly just like Ray had shown him, and laid his jacket over the dog's shivering body. Minutes passed. Then hours. Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat with his knees drawn to his chest, listening to Shadow's uneven breathing. Outside, the storm raged on, snow slamming against the walls like an endless ocean. Every gust reminded him of the nights he'd spent under bridges, in alleys, behind dumpsters. Nights when nobody cared if he made it till morning. But this night was different. Tonight someone had cared, and even if it was just for one night, it was enough. He broke a protein bar in half and ate slowly, saving the other piece for Shadow. When the dog stirred, Ethan smiled faintly and held it out. "You're a fighter," he said. "Guess that makes two of us." For a long while they just sat there, boy and dog, two lost souls keeping each other alive through shared warmth. Ethan gently rested his hand on Shadow's fur and whispered, "I used to have someone too. Before Mom got sick." His voice cracked, the words barely leaving his lips. "But it's okay. You're here now." As the night deepened, the wind outside began to quiet. Shadow shifted, resting his head on Ethan's lap, letting out a small sigh that sounded almost peaceful. Ethan leaned back against the wall, exhaustion finally overtaking him. "Good night, Shadow," he murmured. And for the first time in a long while, the boy drifted to sleep, not in fear, not in hunger, but in the fragile comfort of hope. Morning crept slowly into the world, painting the sky in pale shades of silver and blue. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence so deep it almost felt sacred. Inside the gas station storage room, faint sunlight slipped through the small window, landing on Ethan's face. He stirred awake, groggy, then froze when he realized that Shadow wasn't beside him. Panic surged through his chest. "Shadow?" he called softly, his voice cracking. He scrambled to his feet, then heard the sound of quiet footsteps near the front of the store. Ray stood at the counter, talking to someone in uniform, a tall man with a trimmed beard and the calm posture of someone used to discipline. His jacket had a faded military patch on the sleeve, and beside him, resting on one knee, was Shadow, alive, alert, tail wagging weakly. Ethan's breath caught. "Shadow!" The dog turned at once, ears perking, and limped toward him. Ethan dropped to his knees as Shadow pressed his head into the boy's chest. Tears stung his eyes as he whispered, "You're okay. Thank God." The man in uniform watched quietly, his expression softening. "Is this your dog, son?" he asked. Ethan shook his head. "No, sir. I just found him hurt. I couldn't leave him there." Ray nodded toward the officer. "This is Captain Reeves." He stopped for gas and noticed the tag on the dog's collar. The man crouched beside them, brushing away snow from the tag. "This isn't just any dog," Reeves said, his voice low. "He's a retired rescue canine, been missing for weeks." Ethan's eyes widened. "A rescue dog?" Reeves smiled faintly. "Yeah, looks like he found someone who needed rescuing, too." Ray chuckled under his breath. "Guess fate works both ways, huh?" Ethan looked down at Shadow, his heart swelling with relief and something deeper. Gratitude, maybe, or the quiet understanding that this meeting wasn't an accident. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds, glinting off the snow like a promise of better days ahead. Captain Reeves knelt beside Shadow, gently running his hand along the dog's fur. "You did good, boy," he murmured, inspecting the bandaged wound. Shadow's tail wagged faintly, as if recognizing the familiar tone of command and kindness. Ethan watched, a knot forming in his chest. He didn't want to lose him, not after everything they'd been through. Reeves looked up at Ethan. "You said you found him last night?" Ethan nodded. He was lying in the snow, bleeding. "I didn't know he was a police dog. I just wanted to help." His voice was quiet but steady. Reeves studied the boy for a long moment. Most people would have walked away, especially in that storm. Ethan shrugged, eyes lowering. "If I walked away, he would have died. And I know what that feels like, to be left behind." That simple sentence hit Reeves harder than he expected. The man's stern expression softened. "You remind me of someone I used to know," he said quietly. "Someone who never gave up on the ones who needed help the most." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small radio. "Mind if I make a quick call?" Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. Reeves turned slightly away, speaking into the radio. "Dispatch, this is Captain Reeves. I've located K9 Shadow, injured but alive. I also have a boy here who might have just saved his life. A burst of static crackled before a voice replied, full of emotion. Copy that. Thank God. Within minutes, a rescue van arrived outside. Paramedics stepped out carrying veterinary gear. One of them knelt beside Shadow, checking his pulse and vitals. He's stable, sir, she said. Just needs proper care. Reeves turned back to Ethan. You're coming with us, he said. He trusts you. I think you're part of the reason he made it through the night. Ethan blinked in surprise. Me, but I don't have anywhere to. Reeves placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You do now. As they helped Shadow into the van, Ethan climbed in beside him, resting his hand gently on the dog's paw. For the first time in years, he wasn't running from the cold. He was moving toward something that felt a lot like home. The shelter smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm straw, a strange mix of pain and healing. Ethan sat in a small waiting area, his hands clasped tightly as he watched through the glass window. Inside the treatment room, a vet and 2 assistants worked carefully on Shadow's wound. Every few seconds, Ethan's eyes flicked to the clock, each tick dragging like an eternity. Captain Reeves stood beside him, arms crossed. You did good, kid, he said quietly. Most people wouldn't have made it through that storm, let alone carry a dog that size. Ethan gave a small, uncertain smile. He would have done the same for me. Reeves studied him for a moment. You're right about that. Shadow's trained to save lives. Looks like he found the right person to save his. When the vet finally stepped out, wiping his hands, Ethan jumped to his feet. He's going to be okay, the vet said with a smile. If you hadn't brought him in when you did, he wouldn't have made it through the night. You saved him. Ethan exhaled shakily, relief washing over him like a wave. Can I see him? Just for a moment, the vet said. Ethan stepped into the room and Shadow lifted his head weakly, eyes brightening the instant he saw him. The boy knelt beside the bed, gently stroking his fur. Told you you'd make it, he whispered. Shadow's tail thumped faintly against the blanket. From the doorway, Reeves watched quietly, a small smile playing on his lips. He turned to the shelter staff. This kid used his last $10 to save that dog. Let's make sure he doesn't walk back out to the streets. The woman at the front desk nodded. We'll make room. As Ethan sat beside Shadow, feeling his steady breathing, a strange warmth filled his chest. For the first time in forever, he wasn't alone. He had a friend, and maybe, just maybe, a second chance. The next morning, Ethan woke up to the soft sound of barking echoing through the shelter. Sunlight poured through the windows, spilling across the floor in golden streaks. He sat up slowly, his body still sore from days of cold and exhaustion. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then he saw Shadow resting nearby, tail wagging lazily. A smile tugged at Ethan's lips. Hey, buddy, he whispered. We made it. Outside the kennel, Captain Reeves was on the phone, pacing. When he noticed Ethan awake, he ended the call and walked over with a warm grin. Morning, soldier, he said lightly. Looks like your story traveled faster than the storm. Ethan frowned, confused. My story? Reeves chuckled. Yeah, someone recorded what happened at the gas station. You and Shadow. It's all over the news. People can't believe a kid gave his last $10 to save a wounded dog. He handed Ethan a phone, showing headlines and comments filled with words like hero, selfless guardian angel. Ethan blinked in disbelief. People are talking about me, Reeves nodded. More than that. They're helping. Donations are pouring in for the shelter, and for you. Before Ethan could reply, the shelter director entered carrying a small envelope. This came this morning, she said, smiling. Inside was a letter from a local foundation offering to sponsor Ethan's education and housing. His hands trembled as he read it. He looked up, speechless. I don't understand. Why would they do this? Reeves placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Because kindness spreads, kid. You gave everything you had when the world gave you nothing. That kind of heart deserves a chance. Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. For so long he had been invisible, just another shadow in the cold. Now people actually saw him. Reeves smiled softly. How about we make it official? I could use a helper at the rescue unit. Shadow's going back to work soon, and I think he'd like to have his new best friend around. Ethan looked at Shadow, whose tail thumped eagerly, and nodded through his tears. I'd like that, sir. And for the first time in his life, the word future didn't sound impossible. It sounded real. Weeks passed, and life slowly began to change. The shelter became Ethan's temporary home, a place filled with the sounds of barking dogs, clattering food bowls, and laughter that didn't feel forced anymore. Every morning he woke up early to help feed the animals, clean the kennels, and walk Shadow around the fenced yard. The air always smelled of fresh hay and soap, but to Ethan it smelled like hope. Shadow had healed quickly. His limp faded, his fur grew glossy again, and his spirit, once dimmed by pain, was back in full strength. Wherever Ethan went, Shadow followed like his name promised. The boy would laugh and say, "Guess I'm your human now," and Shadow would bark and reply, tail wagging so hard it shook the leash. Captain Reeves visited often, bringing supplies, encouragement, and stories from the rescue unit. One afternoon he arrived with a surprise, a small wrapped frame. "You might want to hang this somewhere safe," he said. Ethan peeled back the paper and his breath caught. Inside the frame was the crumpled $10 bill he had spent that freezing night. Underneath it, engraved on a silver plate, were the words, "The world changes when you choose kindness." Ethan's throat tightened. "You kept it?" he whispered. Reeves nodded. "That bill started a miracle, son. You gave when you had nothing. Don't ever forget what that means." That evening, Ethan sat outside with Shadow as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in warm golds and soft purples. Snow still lingered on the ground, but it no longer felt like an enemy. It glittered like a promise. Shadow rested his head on Ethan's knee, eyes half closed, content. The boy stroked his fur gently. "You know," he said softly, "I thought I saved you that night, but maybe you saved me." The dog gave a soft whine, pressing closer. A breeze swept through the yard, carrying with it the faint sound of laughter from inside. Ethan looked up at the glowing shelter sign, his heart full. He wasn't a homeless boy anymore. He was part of something bigger, a family built from love, loyalty, and second chances. As the stars began to appear, Ethan smiled and whispered, "Good night." "Shadow." The dog's tail thumped once against the ground, steady and strong. And in that moment, beneath the quiet sky and the gentle hum of life returning, Ethan finally understood. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can rewrite an entire destiny.